All right, welcome guys. I want to start the stream and talk a little bit more in depth about how to draft in League of Legends. Mostly based on like the basic drafting strategies, what blue side's strengths are, what red side's strengths are, uh, different compositions that you have. So let's say you have disengage, engage, poke, and a pick composition, how to draft for it, partly also what's good against it, differences within compositions, and also the way they relate to each other. So I want to write it down as well. Let's see. Let's go bigger. Should be fine. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about drafting basics. So that means the strategies that you employ and why a draft is successful or not. Different compositions. The differences within compositions, and that also directly relates to what like how you can define champions. We're not going to be fully talking about the MTG colors that LS uses, but just about the basics, that the basic tendencies and statistics of each champion. So tendencies and statistics of champions, and that includes range, scaling, themes, and then the themes being the MTG colors, more or less. Item versus level spikes, which is why you see that I have tabs open on Syndra, Tristana, and whatever. Let's see. The damage type the champions have. Not necessarily talking about physical damage or magic damage. The versatility of champions, so what they can do in different games. Talking about tier lists, not making an entire tier list, but talking about how you can use a tier list in your drafts and how it relates to pick and ban phase. And also a little bit about specific champion weaknesses / strengths. So to start out, I was reading Discord, my bad. Start out about drafting. The basic things of blue side and red side. So we'll just rename these to blue side, to blue side and to red side, just to make it even more clear. One of the things you see the most, especially in pro play, is that red side bans a lot of AD carries. And that in general you can say that blue side is the side that bans comfort picks. So for example, if you know that the enemy jungle is an Olaf main, then it's nice to ban out Olaf, because they can ban counters to Olaf, and if it's not a high priority pick for your team, there's a high chance that you're not going to pick it and you're going to give it over to them. So blue side has a lot of respect bans for the other team. And red side bans mostly the incredibly OP picks. So for example, that's why you see a lot of red side Aphelios bans, and then they also put a Senna ban in there, maybe even an Ornn ban if people don't want to face it, or if people think that Ornn is such a high priority on the tier list that there's no way to play around it, which is not true, but that's besides the point. Of course, blue side gets the first pick, so it's B1, R1, R2, B2, B3, R3. That means that red side 3 has the last counter pick, and it also means that, for example, if you pick on see if blue side hasn't picked a mid laner yet, so they pick AD carry, support top, AD carry, support jungle. That if you pick a mid laner on R3, let's say you pick Corki, it means that with your last 2 bans you can ban out hard counters to Corki to make sure that he has a safer laning phase, or hard counters or just champions in general that can match the Corki. So you give a lot of safety to your last pick. And the same of course goes for R5. R5 is of course not you can't ban it out after you've picked it, but you know exactly what the enemy team is going to, what the enemy team looks like, because R5 is the last pick of all of them. So then you can safely pick a Corki, or you can safely pick Aurelian Soul or Bard or whatever. That all doesn't matter. But that's the good thing about red side, that you have a lot of counter picks for your team. And besides that, you can also take picks away. So let's say that there are 3 champions that are extremely OP on red side, and those champions I will just do standard bans. So champions are Ornn, let's say Aphelios is actually unplayable, and Olaf in the jungle is unplayable. That means that if you, by banning out the 3 champions, there's no way the blue side can pick them, but you also can't pick them. And the thing is that of course if you leave open, let's say Aphelios and Olaf, that blue side prioritizes Olaf, that means that you can pick Aphelios still. So that's something to take into consideration, to not ban every single champ, even let's say if you have a counter pick for them. Another standard drafting thing is on red side R1 and R2 to pick roles that have not been selected yet on the blue side. So if blue side first pick is an Aatrox, you most likely know that Aatrox is gonna go top lane. Mid lane Aatrox isn't seen a lot, so they're already telling what they're gonna do in one lane. And let's say if nothing is banned, that means that there's a lot of other high priority picks left up for taking. That means that on R1 and R2, you can pick 2 strong picks in different lanes. And they go well into, and they can go well into the Aatrox, and you take away 2 strong picks from B2 and B3. Let's say if or not Corki, because I said that. Let's just say that Olaf is the highest priority. If you pick away the Aphelios for AD carry and you pick away the Olaf for jungle, there's no way for blue side to pick them as well. So, and let's say if you counter the Aatrox with a Mordekaiser or Lucian or whatever, then you're basically wasting a pick, because you already know what they're gonna do. There's no way for them to ban out more top laners unless you get to the second phase of the picks. So the best thing to do is to pick on R1, R2 is to pick strong champions that can be very versatile, that can go well into a lot of matchups, because you of course also have the 3 first bans, so you can choose. You can already predetermine what you're gonna play, or at least think about it, and then ban it away. And of course then you have a blind pick AD carry or mid lane, jungle or support, but because you have the bans before that, you can make sure that they're not versus an extremely hard counter matchup, and you take away picks from the blue side. And then of course the same could go for blue side, but most of the times they match the pick. So if you go, say they first pick Aatrox, R1 is Aphelios and R2 is say Braum, then most of the times blue side would also pick an AD carry and a support as well. Just say Nautilus, because then now you can see that red side has already drafted the bot lane, but blue side can pick something that goes well into the red side bot lane, and then you're basically forcing red side to pick a strong top lane matchup. Let's say because one of the counters to Aatrox, or at least it's also Camille also outskills the Aatrox. So if you pick Camille on R3, you already have an answer for for the blue side priority pick, and then there's no way that they can ban it out, because if you opt for like a jungler, you go for Olaf, there's a high probability that they're gonna ban out maybe Aatrox counters, because you haven't shown your top lane pick yet, unless you of course want to go Olaf top lane, and they could also ban out mid lane champions. But it's more obvious if they will target out the Aatrox picks, and that's due to the drafting style that R4, R5, and B4 and B. That B4, B5, and R4, R5 are picks that round off your composition. This can already now, for me, be a nice transition to talk about different compositions. But what I mean with R4, R5, and B4, B5 rounding out the composition is that you can finish the theme of champions that you have picked in the first 3 picks on either blue side or red side. Oh, I don't want red. I don't want black, I mean. Let's see. So you've picked a few strong champions here, you've picked a few strong champions here. And then let's say they go Aatrox, they go Kalista, and they go Nautilus or whatever. Doesn't really matter what to pick. But as a blue side team, and the same of course goes the other way around, you know, from if blue side has these same picks, then it's just the opposite. As blue team, you now know that red team is short ranged and it wants to engage. Like Aatrox has to run into you, Kalista is short ranged, he has to dash into you, and Nautilus also wants to hook into your enemy team. That means that you can counter those picks with your last B4 and B5 picks. So you could, for example, you could take Braum, or you could take Corki, or you could take something that's really mobile. Instead of Corki, you can go like Ezreal. Instead of Braum, you could go Thresh. Or you could even go Alistar, of course. Alistar can engage with his full combo, but he doesn't have to. Like if the champions all run into him, he just has a free knockup. And of course, what I said, the same way goes for red side. If we swap all these picks around, then you can already see that blue side is a team that really wants to engage. They want to run into you because they're short range, they're heavy engaged champions. And there's not even tendency of players that the blue side team that you're facing is very aggressive. It's literally what the champions want to do. Like Aatrox is not ranged. What is he gonna do if you're just standing one screen away from him and you can hit him and he can't hit you? There's nothing else that enables Aatrox to do something. And the same sort of goes for Nautilus. Nautilus also has to hook in to use his passive to stun people, otherwise he's same with Aatrox together. They're basically just meat sacks that are there to soak up damage. And if you want to pick a meat sack, you might as well just pick Dr. Mundo or something like that, something that can just face tank more damage than they can. And Kalista, of course, being a early game champion and also quite short range. So then on R4 and R5, now you can, even on red side, you can match this with, because they've already showed support, let's say, you can match it with an R4 Braum, if you haven't picked support earlier, of course. And then last pick, you can have whatever pick you have open. You can counter pick jungle, you can counter pick AD carry, support, mid lane. That's all fine. That's all depending, of course, on what you pick on R1, 2, and 3. But then again, you see that they have a short range. You see that they have a lot of engaged tools where they have to run into you. So you can go Azir, you can go Malzahar. No, not Malphite. You can go Malzahar to lock somebody down. You can even go Poppy just to deny the jumps from Kalista. You can deny the engage from Aatrox. You could also go Cassiopeia. Like there's so many picks that work into champions that want to heavily engage onto your team. And of course, this is only the example of with a heavy engaged comp that wants to run into you. I was fucking muted. What are people talking about? The drafting, yeah, so we'll just quickly go over different compositions. This is also mostly for my own team as well. But it also just gives like a basic overview of what kind of picks you can throw in B1, B2, B3, and R1, R2, R3. To be able to cement your playstyle and your composition. And then afterwards you can finish it up, and you can, with your last two picks, you can counter the enemies. So there's, let's see, different compositions. So the basic things that are, we're not gonna start with disengage. So we have engage, disengage, poke comp, which is basically also a siege comp slash a range comp. It's all due to the different natures, different champions that you can pick, and then you also have a pick composition. Oh shit! I don't want to do that. And you can also. Sorry, I have to talk with other people as well. It's kind of unfortunate, but it's whatever. No, but then let's say you just want to practice some kind of composition, and you want to go. You want to pick a disengage comp. So there's a lot of champions that you can pick that have the tendency or the theme or the color, like LS would say it, for to make nice disengages. So you can go. Let's say if you go Braum, you go Azir, and of course champions, they pan over to different compositions, because a champion can, even if they can do only one thing, like Aatrox running into you, you could pair Aatrox with a heavy engage comp if you have the setup to make him work, but he could also go in a disengage comp, because if you have 5 champions on the enemy team that really that are short range or melee and that want to run into you, then Aatrox has a place in your composition, because the enemy team basically enables Aatrox by running into him, by having the tendency that the champions have. But back to disengage, so you can go like you have Braum, you have Azir, you take Gragas in the jungle. Let's say you take you take Xayah as an AD carry, and then we only need top lane, and let's say you take a Maokai. How is red side team? Of course, of course they can poke you out. There's multiple options, of course, that they have to play around the blue side composition. But most of the teams that at least I see in like Diamond or Master Elo, and so I also watch a lot of pro play, and it's just playing an engage comp is one of the easiest things to do. And then if you have something on red sides that is engage, so let's say you have an Ornn, and Ornn whatever, Ornn, let's just say Ornn is mid lane, because then I can pick Aatrox as well. Aatrox is top lane. So okay, maybe the Maokai will lose the isolated 1v1 matchup in the top lane versus the Aatrox, but it doesn't matter, because if Aatrox is not the strongest split pusher, he doesn't build Triforce, he doesn't have a lot of turret damage or escapes and stuff like that. So then once you get to the team fight stage, what is the red side team gonna do versus this composition? Of course, picking Ornn into a first pick Braum is not the smartest thing to do, because Braum can block the Ornn shield. But then still, if you pick Olaf and you go Kalista, what do we need? Let's just say Ornn is support, because it makes it easier for me to pick something. Even Diana. So the full comp of red side, they're all heavy engaged. They all have to walk forward and able to do something. So Ornn has his engaged. If you wanna Ornn ult defensively, okay, you can, but then Ornn is probably gonna be out of position. Aatrox has to run in, Olaf has to run in, Diana has to dash in, and Kalista can of course jump backwards and save the support Ornn with her ultimate, but still, she's quite an aggressive champion that wants to engage. And what's gonna happen in this situation when you're playing an engage composition versus a disengage composition is that every single champion on the blue side team is gonna be enabled. So let's say if red side wants to fight for a Baron, they want to fight for a Dragon, they go all in, they heavily engage. Let's say I'm gonna put all the champions up here in the map. It's whatever. Maokai face tanking. And the Braum as well. So then what's gonna happen is that at the moment that the red team engages, blue team is just gonna use their abilities or their champion tendencies to let people run into them, and that automatically creates a winning fight for the blue team. Because if you run into a Braum, he can easily get your stacks off. So everybody's gonna get stunned. If you're in a choke point like here, you have a Braum ult, you're just not gonna have the best time. With the meta now, AD carry is taking exhaust. If Olaf runs in with his Ragnarok and he runs through the Azir ult or the Maokai ult or the Braum ult, he's exhausted. He's not gonna do anything. If the Diana jumps on the Xayah, then Xayah is gonna ult. So Diana is useless. And if she jumps into the Azir, then Azir is gonna ult. So then Diana is still useless because there's no reliable way for red side to get onto the blue side team and still be and actually do the damage that they want to do. And even besides it, even if you only have the Olaf running in, so Olaf is the only one that's going in somehow, then you can have a Gragas ult that just knocks back the Kalista, knocks back the Diana, knocks back Aatrox, disrupts the Ornn ultimate. Like in theory, there should be no possible way for the red side team to safely engage on the blue side team. And this is one of the ways where in a draft you can already completely counter the enemy team composition just by looking at what they're picking. So if they first pick Ornn, if the R1 pick Ornn, the R2 pick Aatrox, the R3 pick Olaf, you know that they're gonna run in, so you can safely pick champions that are good against these like heavy engage and low range champions. Then as Aless oftentimes says is, okay, there's ways that you could save the red side composition. So okay, they have disengage. What is nice into disengage? Okay, you can go poke. So you go Zoe mid lane and you go Ezreal in the you can go Ezreal on the bot lane. Well, the situation you create here is that Zoe and Ezreal don't have the same champion tendencies that the Ornn, the Aatrox, and the Olaf have. And this is something that LS stresses a lot, which is hopefully rising in importance in like professional or semi-professional League of Legends. But by drafting Zoe and Ezreal to be able to deal with the disengage and the safety that the blue side team has, the Olaf is just gonna be he's gonna be a meat shield. The same goes for Aatrox and the same goes for Ornn, because there's no way that they can get onto the backline champions of blue side. There's no way that any of these first three picks can do the damage that they want to do. And then you just have two champions that basically have to carry the entire team on their backs, because there's no way that their other picks are gonna be useful in some kind of way. Then, so we've already seen an engage comp, we've seen a disengage comp. What if you talk about, we've already seen a poke composition, but I think I fucked up and I was muted. But so if people have a disengage comp and you haven't fucked up your R1 to R3 or B1 to B3, um, you can safely draft a poke composition in order to make their disengage composition useless. So if the this is not gonna be poke. This is gonna be disengage, and this is gonna be poke. So you can see already if they somehow prioritize Braum as a champion in their blue side first pick, you already know, okay, what does Braum want to do? Braum wants people to run into him because he doesn't have the CC or the range to stun enemy champions or to engage on the enemy champions. There's no way for Braum to be useful if he isn't enabled by people running into him. But by first picking Braum on B1 blue side, you're already saying, alright, we're gonna play a safe disengage composition, and you can also see Azir come out, and you can see like an Ezreal come out. Then of course it's very easy for red side to say, alright, you want us to run into you, we're not gonna run into you, we're gonna pick Zoe and Lethality Varus, so we're just gonna poke you out, we're gonna force you to go to base, and then as an extra, we're gonna pick Fiora. So besides red team completely poking out, and disabling the blue side team, blue side also has an extremely hard scaling split pusher that they have to deal with. So that already in the first 3 picks, it already makes it very hard for blue side to win the game only because they first picked Braum. And then in order for blue side to save their composition and to still be enabled to do something, is that they're gonna have to pick some form of hard engage in order to shut down the Zoe or shut down the Varus. But let's say if they pick a cannon then, who can just flash alt and not one shot but do a lot of damage, then you have no way of dealing with the Fiora, so you have to pick like a hard engaged jungler. So what if you pick Gragas? Well, they have mobility, they have ways to dodge it, and then red team can react on R5 with with a champion that denies the Gragas. So there's, and also the Gragas is not, Gragas is not a poke champ. Gragas is, well, he is a disengaged champion, but also if you poke him out, he has to alt defensively and you can just regroup. So then for blue side that leaves less good options for them to win the game in draft or to win the game based on champion tendencies alone. And this also then means that, of course, like there's not that there are teams that prioritize Braum and at first pick Braum, but that means that your first pick on B1 already shows a lot about what you want to do with your team. So if you first pick Aatrox, you know, alright, they're going to be playing strong top side, but if you first pick Ornn, then red team already knows, oh, okay, well, they want to engage on us, and they're probably not going to play through top side. They're going to play through mid or bot, because Ornn is not the strongest laner. Let's say one of the few things that has been picked on B1, and it doesn't really show its tendencies, is a Rakan. Because Rakan already gives a big threat for red team. The blue side is gonna pick Xayah as well, just because they pair up so well. But Rakan is a champion that can engage, but he can also play disengage. He has a lot of mobility. He can peel for his AD carry as well. But for example, you could also first pick Varus, because Varus has 2 different modes. You can go lethality or you can go attack speed, and based on that, there's many different ways in which the first pick champion on B1 can interact with the entire composition that red side is gonna pick. And also one of the good things about first picking, let's say an AD carry, of course, unless you're picking Senna or you're picking Kalista, is that AD carries, most of the AD carries have the same tendencies, as in that they have range, of course. They don't want to be like hard engaged on, like if somebody is within or within like melee range of an AD carry, there's a big chance that the AD carry is not going to be happy with it as a champion. The only two differences that there are is, of course, if you pick, or even Ezreal, if you pick Senna, you're already going to say, alright, it's going to be a fasting Senna, so we're going to have like a tank support that's going to be farming, and there's going to be a lot of sustain in the lane. It's going to be really annoying. If you pick Kalista, if you pick Kalista on B1, you're already saying, alright, so we're probably going to play through bot lane, because Kalista is a very strong pick, and then we want to snowball her. If you pick Ezreal on B1, there's also a big chance that you're saying, alright, we're not going to play through bot lane, because Ezreal needs 2 items to be useful. We're going to try to poke you out, we have a lot of scaling. But overall, in general, any AD carry that you can pick has a little bit of the same things to them. Of course, if you pick Lucian early game, same as with Kalista, you're still saying, alright, we're gonna early focus on the bot lane and see how it goes. And then if you go Vayne, you can say, okay, we're gonna go extremely late game. If you first pick Saya, you're saying, alright, maybe we're gonna pick Rakan, you better ban it out, or you better pick it as well. So these are all kind of ways where you can, these are all the ways why first picking an AD carry, or at least blind picking an AD carry, is oftentimes a very good choice. Also because there's not a whole lot of like extremely strong, or let's say meta AD carries. So if you pick one, you already take it away from the rest, and if you ban out one or two of the hard counters, or in lane, or into the composition that you want to draft, then you already have a very strong basic core of the composition, or the team that you're gonna run. And that is then of course also saying that like the first 3 picks that you do on even blue side and on red side, the first 3 picks are always the core of the composition. They show what you want to do, they show how you want to play the game, they show basically everything. And then the last 2 picks is you can round it up. So you can round comp up. And you can either pick champions that have a really nice synergy with the other champions that you have. Maybe there's another strong pick that you have, but most of the times on blue and on red, it's to counter what the enemy team wants to do. So if you have not a disengage. So let's say if you have a pick composition and red side picks a poke composition, then blue side can pick more hard engage, or they can pick more sustained damage, or ways to negate the poke that red team wants to do, that red team has shown on R1, R2 and R3. And also the same goes the other way around. So you on the B1, B2, B3, you know the blue side wants to have picks. They want to invade and just pick off single members of the red side team to create man advantages, and then take objectives, snowball, get vision, stuff like that. So you can pick champions on R4 and R5 that counter what the blue side team wants to do. And then these are all ways how you can, in B4, B5 and R4, R5, how you can round up the composition that you have in order to counter the one that the enemy has. Of course, the only downside is if you have, if your first 3 champion picks, either on blue side or on red side, if they're very heavily on one theme or one tendency, like engage, disengage, poke, siege, pick, whatever you want. If you pick champions that turn away from the theme that the rest of your champions have in order to counter what the enemy team is trying to do, then you have a mismatch in what the characters on your team want to do. So those are all decisions that as a coach or as a player or whatever that you have to make and have to think about is, right, not only how well is the isolated matchup going, so during the laning phase, what are the tendencies of the enemy team, but also what are the tendencies of my own team. As I say, if you pick Xerath on R5 and you have a full engage composition on R4, 3, 2 and 1, and then the enemy team has like backline reach, then either Xerath is gonna have to do all the damage because his team is just gonna be like a meat sack because the enemy team picks disengage or whatever, or they can pick poke. Or if the enemy team has engaged, then Xerath is gonna be standing there in the backline alone, and he's just gonna be useless. He's just gonna get killed instantly at the beginning of each fight, and you basically pick something that doesn't add anything to your composition, and you could even say that you're basically just playing into what the enemy team wants you to do. Then onto the tendencies and statistics of champions. I thought this was one of the things that I think I spent the most time on in the previous days, because it's a big subject, and it's something that also heavily defines the way you want to draft, or the way that you want to play the game, that your team wants to play the game. And I think the first thing to come to is what I've already mentioned in the B1 and R1, R2 picks, and also the bans. That a lot of times these high priority picks get banned out. So you have Ornn is being banned a lot, Aatrox is being banned a lot, pre-nerf Aphelios was being banned a lot, like Camille on release was being permanently banned because he was just way too overpowered. You have all these kind of champions that through meta changes and patches become extremely overpowered, and those champions you would say are tier 0. Tier 0 basically just means that a champion is so strong that it doesn't matter where you pick it, or into what matchup, or with or against what kind of team composition. They're so incredibly strong that they're still going to be able to win you the game. And of course, that's up to Riot to make sure that there's no tier 0 champions. But sometimes they still exist, and then it's just a matter of banning them out on red side. Because on blue side you have the first pick, and you can pick your champion regardless, because it doesn't matter what kind of matchup it is. It doesn't matter what kind of team composition you play against it. The stats or the items that the champion can build are so incredibly overpowered that there's no reliable way to counter it with any kind of picks that you can pick on red side, or any kind of picks that you can, or compositions that you can draft on blue side. That is the most like straightforward thing to take into account when you're drafting. And the other things are ways that, or it's not really drafting ways, but it's ways to categorize champions besides just the MTG color scheme that LS has. So the things that I've written down is range, scaling, of course the themes, which are then sort of the colors, item or level spikes, damage types, versatility, tier list, and specific champion weaknesses and strengths. So to start off with range, of course you have short range and you have long range, which is short range, you could also call it melee. That's also another way to put it. But let's say if you go Galio, you go Kai'Sa, who's another extremely short range champion, you go Rumble. I don't even know where these people are gonna go, in what lane, it doesn't matter. You go Renekton. You can already see that there's a lot of short range champions on the blue side, and if you then turn it around on red side, you pick Azir, who has a lot of long range. You pick Caitlyn, so of course massive range. You pick Ornn, and then you already basically, with only acknowledging that the enemy champions have little range, or that there are a lot of melee champions, you can just outrange them, and there's no way for blue side to do anything. And then they would have to turn away from the theme that all of the champions have, and they have to pick hard engage, and then on R4 and R5 you can pick disengage, and you completely just disable everything that their champions want to do. Just thinking about more long range champions. Of course, most of the long range champions you could say are AD carries, but like Taliyah also has quite a nice range. Oh yeah, Xerath, a very long range champion. You could even go Zoe, or you can go Ziggs. And those are all differences to take into account into what the enemy team wants to do. And of course, a lot of short range champions are heavy on the engage, or want other people to run into you. So of course, Braum is a melee champion, and Braum wants people to run into him. Aatrox is also a melee champion. He needs to run into other people, because otherwise he's just going to be useless. As Graves, as a short range champion, Graves has a lot of item scaling, of course, but he's still short range, and if you can outrange him, that means that you can poke him out, force him to either back or hard engage on you. But if he hard engages on you, he's already low because he's been poked out, because he has less range. So that's one of the things that you can take into consideration, or that you should take into consideration when thinking about what kind of champions you want to pick. And then the second thing, of course, is scaling. What everybody always talks about, but scaling, of course, is relative. So let's say if in the top lane you have Aatrox and red team picks Renekton, then you can say that Aatrox outscales Renekton, because at level 16 with a certain amount of items or levels, the Aatrox is going to be stronger than the Renekton, just due to the nature and the design of the champion. But if Renekton is not Renekton, but Renekton is a Fiora, then the Aatrox is going to get outskilled. And then the early game pressure is on Aatrox to make plays and to snowball out of control, because Fiora is going to be unstoppable. But then let's say if you pick a kill, or you pick even Vayne top lane, well, then it's turned around again. Then the Fiora is the one that gets outskilled, and then the Vayne is going to be the one that just has to sit back, the Vayne or kill, and just farm safely. So scaling is not only what the individual champion does, but also how it scales in relation with the opponent. Also, let's say if you have a Lulu and a Kog'Maw, of course Kog'Maw as a champion by itself already scales a lot, but if you pair him up with an Ardent support that can peel for him and keep him alive and increase the damage that you can do, then you even increase the scaling that they have. And then if you pair that up with a Shen in the top lane, and you pair it up with a Galio in the mid lane, then your team is even more scaling, because there's less ways that the Kog'Maw can die, and then he gets even scarier in the late game when, even if the enemy team, every single champion on their team has 6 items, there's so many ways to enable the Kog'Maw that his scaling overpowers the scaling overpowers the scaling that the enemy team has. And then scaling is also a thing with item versus level spikes, or I should actually say scaling. Of course, the most famous one is Ornn. When Ornn reaches level 13, he upgrades a masterwork item for himself, and then afterwards he can upgrade the items for other champions. This means that Ornn as a tank is a level scaling champion. Of course, he also scales very well with the items he buys, because he gets tanky. But his real power spike comes at level 13, and then afterwards, because he just gets so much value from his passive. And for example, a champion that scales very well with items instead of with levels is Misfortune. Because Misfortune, the total amount of waves of her ultimate is only increased by 2, but she has a 75% AD scaling. And that's why you see the Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge, Bloodthirster build, because she just has so much AD and she does so much damage. And this means that by buying items, you make the Misfortune a lot stronger. And most AD carries are item scaling, just because critical strike is so strong and scales so well into the late game because of the damage amplifier that it has. Of course, Vayne is a late game carry, but Vayne she skills very well with her items. Of course, she has item power spikes, but she also skills very well with levels. That's due to the Silver Bolt's bonus to damage from 4% to 14% of a target's maximum health. Of course, if you have your Silver Bolts maxed, you're going to be very strong. Same goes for Tristana. the range of her basic attacks gets increased per level. There's also level scaling. And as the last one is Syndra, that if you have maxed out the ability, if you have maxed out one of the abilities from Syndra, they do bonus damage. So nothing from the Q, the Dark Sphere, but the W, 20% bonus true damage. Oh, no. W, 20% bonus true damage. E, Scatter the Weak's area of effect 50% wider. Ultimate, Unleash Power's cast range is increased. That means that besides Syndra having good scaling with items, so 70% AP, 60 for the minimum damage, and also 65. That means that Syndra scales very well with items, but also that she scales very well with levels. This is something that, of course, that Sneaky spoke about a little bit in his most recent video about Mage's bot lane and item levels. Is that, let's say, if you put Ziggs in the bot lane, who is a item scaling mage and not necessarily a level scaling mage, because the scaling with levels is less prominent or less strong than what Vayne, Tristana and Syndra have. So if you put Ziggs in the bot lane, you can protect the Ziggs and he can farm up until he has his items. And then if you put Vayne or Tristana, of course we've seen Tristana mid, if you put Tristana mid lane, if you put Syndra mid lane, they get solo XP, so they reach those level power spikes sooner. And these are also all ways of assigning champions in lanes, and also thinking about, hey, if we're versus a Misfortune who's gonna scale with items, okay, that's now we know. So, and we know why she scales, we know how she scales, we know what her item power spikes are. What can we do against it, or can we outskill them, or can we shut them down in the early game? So by knowing this, you can draft around it, but you can also see how your own draft works when the game is being played out. So knowing that like a level 18 Vayne is incredibly strong, or a Tristana with the increased range, or a Syndra with the damage, or a Ziggs that's full build, doesn't even matter. Of course, he needs to be level 6 for its ultimate. But then the Ziggs is of course going to be very strong if he has 6 items. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what kind of level he is. So that's also something. And then next, of course, you have the MTG colors that LS likes to talk about a lot. Oh, that's not good. See, I had them somewhere, but I have way too many things on my computer. Let's see if I can find it really quickly. Yeah, there it is. So red, very aggressive, strong early, so red like Aatrox is red, or Darius is a very red champion. Green, Harmony, Synergy, Spike, so Ezreal's a little bit green because he has very good item spikes. Ivern Jungle is very green because he enables other champions by being in the game, so he has a lot of Harmony. Black, power at a cost, demand that must be met, or maybe even a mini game that you have to play. So for example, Aatrox is also a red champion. Aatrox is also a black champion together with red. Black as in that you need to hit your Qs, and enemy people can dodge it, so you're basically playing this kind of mini game with yourself in order to make the champion useful. And blue is control, manipulation, terrain warping, strong late games. A lot of AD carries are blue. Control, manipulation and terrain warping are sort of the same thing. So champions that can have a lot of zoning potential. So you can have an Orianna with her ball that's going to be zoning out the team because they can't walk up, because then Orianna will just press R. We can have Gragas who shapes his terrain by throwing down his Q, or with his ultimate that he has a displacement. Talia can of course literally build a wall where people can't walk past, but also her E, the ground ability, it's also something that you shape the terrain so that people don't want to walk or go across it. Cassiopeia is one of those champions that can do that as well. Gangplank as well. So there's a lot of options within control, manipulation, and terrain warping or shaping abilities. The last one is blue. Blue is in the jack of all trades. And also one of the terrain shaping is also a blue champion. So Gragas is, I think, one of the whitest champions there is, just because he's so versatile in what he can do. Let's say Varus is also one. So Varus is white because you can either build lethality or you can go attack speed. So that gets decided in the draft, or if the enemy doesn't pick any tanks, then you can go lethality. Otherwise, you have to be the one that does the damage to kill the tanks. So it is already shown, most likely when the draft is done, but that still means that Varus as a champion can do many different things. And then the same also goes for Gragas. Gragas can engage, he can disengage with his ultimate, and also engage with his ultimate. He can build full tank, he can build off tank, he can go full AP. The champion itself just has a lot of different options of what to do in a game, and on how to play out the game and how to itemize. Then we have damage type. So this is something that I noticed in our own games, and also in some games that I saw in EU Masters, and that is that let's say the two damage types that you have are burst and sustained damage. So burst damage, of course, comes a lot from mages or from assassins. With burst and sustained. And sustained damage, of course, comes mostly from AD carries. But so let's say Aphelios, of course, has a lot of sustained damage. Cassiopeia, sustained damage. Azir, sustained damage. Anivia, sustained damage. And let's say like Annie has burst. Aatrox has burst with his Q combo. Diana is a very bursty champion. Depending on the way that you play, Kate, you could also say is a burst champion just because her combo does a lot of damage, but Kate falls in a little bit in between. Kate also has a lot of sustained damage, and she skills very well because she's gonna build crit. I mean, Echo is a very bursty champion. Eve, of course, as well. So these are also all different things that you should that you can think about. Like if you see that the enemy champions have a lot of burst, like what you see now in blue, then you already know that you're going to win a team fight if you can survive the amount of burst that the enemy team has. Because, and of course also Syndra, very, very bursty champion. Because if you can survive the burst of those champions, they have to wait for cooldowns, they have to wait for the spells to be back up, they have to wait to do things again. And in the meantime, and even in the time that they're engaging on you, and while they're waiting for their spells to come back up, your team can still do damage on them. So that means that if you're not blown up by the extremely explosive combination that burst champions have, that means that there's a very high chance that you're gonna win the fight, 1v1 team fight, whatever it is afterwards, just because you can do more damage over time. But this of course also relates to champion scaling and champion tendency. So you could say that Lucian, he can burst, sort of, but he also has a lot of sustained damage because he's an AD carry and he can build crit, and that just scales really well. And he auto attacks, but Lucian is a more early game champion. So if you have your Lucian and an Aphelios, then in the late game, the Aphelios' sustained damage is going to be more valuable than the damage that a Lucian can dish out. So even within all these things, range, scaling, the themes, the item levels, the damage type, these are all in the tier list. These are all dependent also on the champions that you're facing and the champions that the enemy team picks. Because it's not... Of course, with some champions, you can, in isolation, you can say, alright, this champion is very short range. I'm just looking for whatever. Like say Garen. Garen is an extremely short range champion, and there's no way that he is ever gonna outrange any other champion in the game. But for example, if you pick Lucian, talk about range and scaling, Lucian outranges melee champions, but he doesn't outrange like a Caitlyn or an Azir or a Corki or an Ezreal. So it's all relative to what happens in the rest of the game. Versatility I already talked about. That's a little bit wide. So let's say Gragas is a very versatile champion. Varus is a very versatile champion just because he can do many different things. And then the last thing is the specific champion weaknesses and strengths. So this is just that there are certain champions. Of course, there's counters in League of Legends, but that could either be an isolated matchup or in a team composition. And I don't think that the isolated matchup is as important as seeing the bigger picture of how a champion is going to interact with the other 5 champions that they're facing and with the other 4 champions on their own team. But besides that, of course, there are some champions that just completely counter the shit out of what somebody else is trying to do. And one of the things that sprung to mind the quickest, but if, let's say, if blue side first picks Kalista, no, and you go, and red side goes Poppy and Cassiopeia, then there's no way that Kalista is ever going to be able to play the game, because you have the miasma on the ground from Cassiopeia, meaning that Kalista can jump. If she still jumps and Poppy has her W on, then she's also going to get CC'd. So this is a champion tendency, or this is just a champion design that absolutely hard counters what one or multiple enemy champions want to do. Of course, Aatrox has this little dash that also countered by Poppy. I had one other. Oh, for example, let's say if you pick Galio. If you pick Galio on R5, because you know, well, not even Galio support, and then you pick Kassadin on the mid lane. Galio was recently changed, where his ultimate gives a magic damage shield for his team. And Kassadin also, of course, takes reduced magic damage. So if you see that the enemy team has picked a lot of magic damage inside their team, I just go whatever Zyra support. I don't really care. Then you can pick those kind of champions just because they're naturally better against what the opponent's team has drafted. You know they have a lot of magic damage, alright. We can pick these champions, and suddenly a Kassadin is viable in the later game in the team fights, and he's not gonna have such a hard time. And he's not gonna have such a hard time in the laning phase because he's versus a double AP combo, so there's a big chance that he's gonna survive. And even after level 6 with the Galio ult and the Galio shield. So these are all the things that, or not even all the things, of course. There's a lot more, and I can talk about it for many more hours. But these are sort of the basics of all the things that you have to take into consideration when you're drafting or building team compositions or scouting enemy teams or whatever. These are all the things that you have to take into consideration. You have to think about what the enemy's compositions is going to do, what the tendency of the champions are, the theme, the range, the scaling, the items, the damage type. If certain champions are very versatile, so with the Gragas or the Varus, or also if they can be flex picks. So if you have a set, you could have set jungle, you can have set top lane, you can have set support. Those are all the things that you have to think about when you're drafting, and also in the game, of course. If you know that you're gonna outskill them at 2 items because they picked the full early game composition, then the pressure, of course, is on the team that has the early game composition, because they need to end within 20 minutes. And for your team, the only thing you need to do is survive and not just give overkills to the enemy team that they can snowball out of control. So then if you know that you're going to survive and automatically win the game at 20 minutes, there's a lot less pressure on your team because you just counter them with scaling. Or if they go engage, you counter them with disengage. Or if they go disengage, you counter them with poke. So these are all ways that you can already win the game in draft. And if you have the time, or if the team that plays the game understands this, it just makes it easier also to know the game plan, know what champions want to do, know how to play against it. And it just shows how essential drafting is in League of Legends.